All right, good morning. It is 11:03 and today is January 13th of 2023. This is Coffee with Community Services. My name is John Decker, the Director of Community Services at Alta California Regional Center. This is our weekly vendor meeting. And as I like to do, I would like to try to introduce some of our staff that we have on. And so from our community services department, oh, look at that. I almost picked Cindy first. Can't do that. That's client services manager, Cindy Lay. So from our community services folks, we've got Dan Kilmer on celebrating a birthday this week. Happy birthday, Dan. And let's see, Christy Schaefer from Community Services and Carly, our employment specialist, is on here. My assistant Zach's on. Our community services manager Helen is on. We have Gary from Community Services as well that has joined us. And I see Danny on there, our new Community Services Specialist. We'll introduce him a little bit later as well. And I see Nicole on here, and almost said Phil Perez too. Nope, got to skip over people that are Community Services alumni. So I see Shirley's on here, and Alicia, our HCBS specialist, who's going to be going over some things. We've got our number of client services managers that are on here. So we have Sharon and Trisha and Phil, and let's see, I'll go back to my other page here. And client advocates, I see Reva this morning. Good morning. And as I mentioned, Cindy Lay is on. Client services manager Kanisha, as always, is here. We have our Jason. I think I said Jason earlier. If not, Jason is on definitely. The director of client services, Michelle Johnson. We have Rima, our deaf and hard of hearing specialist, that is on here as well. I'm trying to get the situation squared up with the ASL interpreters, and hopefully it's working out okay. And Associate Client Services Director Jennifer Bloom is on here as well. So good morning. And I think I got, if I missed you, you can wave your hand around. But I think I got the folks. Oh, and of course Hewitt, who I'm going to be introducing here in just a moment. So he'll be up. First off, we have an announcement to make that, of course, became public notice once immediately after. Well, we had a number of things that happened on last Friday afternoon after Coffee with Community Services. So first off, I will say, and for those that you know her already and enjoyed working with her, Jennifer Bloom is here today as Associate Client Services Director, and it was announced last Friday that Jennifer is going to, I believe it's going to be at the end of this month, will be taking on the role of our second Director of Client Services at Alta California Regional Center. So we are very happy to work with Jennifer. You know, I have had amazing experiences with Jennifer since my very first day. She was such a standout as in case management when I first started. And so just been able to see her go from being a manager and associate director. And we are so pleased to have Jennifer being responsible for this. Jennifer, will you real quickly just share with folks what your kind of area of oversight is going to be for this
Sure.
kind of new position
Yeah.
or bringing back or whatever it is?
Thank you for that nice introduction, John. I'm humbled and honored and excited for my new role starting on January 30th. And I will initially primarily be overseeing, well, I oversee early start and children's services. Let me start there. And a number of other little projects here and there. But my primary role upon taking this new position will be to really focus on the Early Start program as a whole. There are a number of initiatives and data points that we need to bring ourselves up to speed with, and it's just more than I can do in my current role. So my primary focus initially is going to be Early Start and continuing along with children's services. As that evolves and we get our feet under us a little bit firmer, then Michelle and I are going to be sharing a lot of the duties, because Michelle is carrying a very heavy load. And so I'm looking forward to supporting her and helping make her everyday life easier. So we will be dividing and conquering and splitting some of the roles so that it's more equitable between the two of us.
Thank you so much. And again, you know, we are very, very happy to have you in this position. And I have especially noticed, you know, Jennifer's interactions with service providers. She very, very much is able to build trust and very much, you know, able to have very strong relationships. And I think that's really important as we continue to have the challenges of expanding the services for our youngest ones. We really are going to have to be, hand in hand with our service providers through this. So,
Yes. Thanks
um,
again, John.
you're welcome. And then I wanted to just say that we also have Leah on, and Adriana and Kate, some of our community services specialists, and Michelle as well is on, our community services manager. So again, good morning to folks. Okay, so the agenda real quickly. Hewitt is a busy man, and I would like to get him going and off doing other things as quickly as possible. So we're going to start off with an update from our emergency coordinator, Hewitt. Then we're going to roll into a transportation discussion. We did send out widely to our transportation providers yesterday. We did send it out to client services managers yesterday as well, that there is a new ability to bill for a different type of rate for transportation. We'll get into that discussion. We're going to get an update on the California budget. So share with you all what the current documents say about the budget. We're going to get an HCBS update. We have our HCBS specialist on and her manager as well. We're going to have a discussion about SLS vendor forum, and I think whether or not we want to push back the vendor forum or not, we'll talk about that. Rate study increases, little discussion about Department of Labor and overtime. We're going to introduce Danny, our new specialist, to you all. And let's see, we've got state of emergency billing, of course, once again, came out right after Coffee with Community Services. And so the state of emergency billing, I'm going to talk about that a little bit so folks know kind of what the instructions are as it relates to that, which there are not really any instructions. And then we also sent out a survey to our residential providers related to 1 to 3 COVID supplemental staffing. And I want to give folks a little update about that as well. So a lot going on. And so I'm going to throw it over to Hewitt first, if we can. And Hewitt, hopefully we can get an update on these activities that have been going on for the last couple of weeks or so. And then what do we have in store for us, maybe?
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. Hewitt Matanari, emergency coordinator here at Alta. So if you haven't noticed, we've been getting a lot of rain events lately. It was the Saturday of January 8th where we had high winds, power went out, 200 plus customers went out. But we did have a high impact area in the Wilton area, southeastern part of the Sacramento County. It was initially evacuation warning on January 8th, then it became evacuation order January 9. 2 of our vendors were evacuated. They were safely evacuated and were relocated to a hotel situation there. We had about 78 clients that were impacted. So we reached out to them just to make sure they were aware of the evacuation order and warnings, and making sure that if they were evacuators or have any needs, we were reaching out to them. But as of now, they lifted the order on Wednesday. They were repopulated. I was tracking with Department of Social Services, and they have been safely repopulated. Again, we're still expecting some more rain this weekend into our holiday on Monday. So just be aware of that. Expect some more flooding and water and wind this coming weekend. So I'm just a friendly reminder, just keep staying alerted with the county or if you have a local city, stay alerted. Sign up for those alerts. There's emergency alerts. Just have a plan for at least 3 days. If the power goes out, you have planning for 3 days. Stay up to date with the county websites. They're always putting information on there. A lot of the counties now are utilizing 211 as information and resource number to call if you have any other questions. Any storm, I think they were using 311 for any like downed trees or that type of situation where roads were blocked by trees. So definitely look at the county websites. They will have an abundance of information for your situation. And of course, make sure your information is up to date. Making sure your address is up to date if that's changed. any phone numbers, because that's what we use to contact you. So making sure those contact information is up to date, and it helps us track you guys a little easier. So definitely keep those things in mind.
Excellent. Hey, Hewitt, if the service providers have specific questions or issues related to like their emergency response plans, things like that, would you be able to be a resource for them if they were to reach out to you, like shoot you an email?
Sure, definitely shoot me an email. Those are good things to review now. If you haven't already,
Right.
remember, just as a reminder too, just check those out. And if you forgot what's in there, I mean, definitely take a look. But if you have any questions, yeah, definitely reach out to me.
And Hewitt, I'll ask if you could just please put your email into our chat. And we've talked about this quite a bit in this meeting and other vendor meetings, and we certainly talk about it during our board meetings. But the department bringing on these emergency coordinator positions at all the regional centers has become very valuable. And I cannot minimize the amount of work that goes into when we identify that there is a relocation that's going on or whatever else. The creation of lists, the checking up on clients, these are all activities done by, regional center staff, typically in the nights and weekends and things like that, to ensure that we've got contact with each individual and ensure that if they have needs, that we can assist them with those emergency needs that they have. And so, we know that there was some drownings that occurred in the south part of the county for people, looks like they were trying to cross roads and things like that. And so I would just encourage folks, continue to stay safe. And with that, I can roll real quickly into the state of emergency billing for folks, and then we can go over to transportation. So I'll jump down to kind of that. So again, thank you very much, Hewitt, for that. Much appreciated, and would just encourage folks to utilize him as a resource. So we sent out widely that there was state of emergency billing that has been allowable for non-residential services. And with that, if there's a client absence that's due to the emergency, you are allowed to bill for that. The only instructions that we are giving out to folks is make sure that you keep a record at your facility, so that if later on you are audited by someone, you've got it very clearly written down somewhere that this was during the time period of the state of emergency, and that the individual did not show up based off of the emergency situation with the storms that was going on. So that is really it. You can people have talked about like, well, what about this or what about that? Like, you're really going to have to use your best judgment to whether or not you feel like it's okay to bill based off the language that's just in DDS's directive. Like, we don't really have the ability to do a lot of interpretation of that. And so again, we want people to be safe. Many people that contacted me, day program operators and transportation primarily, were the two groups of folks that reached out to me directly. And my message, which I think I shared with folks last week, was, you need to keep yourselves safe. You need to keep your staff, your staff safe. You need to keep our clients safe. And so take all of that into consideration when determining what kind of work that you're going to be doing with the clients, whether or not you're going to be transporting them, whether or not you're going to be serving them within your facility. I know in some of our rural areas, it can be very difficult to get into a day program because of the roads and things like that. So again, just the state of emergency billing is going to be available there. I'm assuming at some point there will be something that gives us an end date for that. But for now, it is something that is available for billing. Questions about state of emergency billing? I'll look in the chat too. Okay. Whoops. I hit share my screen a little bit too early. All right, and so that is state of emergency billing because of the storms. And let's go into transportation now. All right, so I am going to be sharing my screen here, and I am going to navigate, as I typically do, from the front page of DDS's website, so folks know how to find these things. All right, and I want to share screen 3. All right, just give me one moment here. Dan Kilmer, are you seeing DDS's website? Sharing
I sure am.
All right, yeah. Perfect, excellent. So from DDS's website, we are going to be talking about transportation, and the information that we're going to be sharing is related to a DDS directive. So on the very front page of DDS's website, you can go to directives to regional centers. And they have the list of the directives that are on here, the very, very long list of things. And this is the transportation. So if you're a transportation provider, you should have received this yesterday via email, I think directly from me was the way it got sent out. And if you did not get it and you're on this call, you know exactly where to find it on DDS's website. So I'm going to go over this with you all, and we'll, whoops, sorry, close that out. And then we'll go for some questions. So let me see if I can make it a little bit larger. So first thing, this came out late Friday, and it describes a transportation services monthly reimbursement rate. My understanding is that the department's been working with a group of providers related to transportation issues, and we have this directive that seems to be the result of those discussions. So first, a directive is not something that exists regularly in law or in regulation. It is something that the Department of Developmental Services is granted the authority to do by the Welfare Institutions Code, by the Lanterman Act. It allows the director to make a directive, and then we must follow those directives. So the department recognizes that to continue to protect consumer health, safety, and the right to access services of their choice, transportation services must be available. With staffing shortages across sectors and certain services being delivered remotely, the department finds that the continued access to transportation services may be supported by a temporary reimbursement methodology. This directive authorizes providers of transportation services to use a monthly reimbursement rate for the provision of transportation services to individuals effective January 1st, 2023 through December 31st of 2023. Each provider will use their unique monthly reimbursement rate calculated based on their average reimbursement, their monthly average reimbursement prior to the pandemic, minus fuel expenses. So if you were a vendor more than 3 years ago of transportation services, this is your alternative services rate that was given to you back in March of 2021. Providers using the monthly reimbursement rate may submit reimbursement claims for actual fuel expenses separately. So from this paragraph, I want to touch on a couple things. One is that it's authorizing providers to do this, which does not mean that it is a requirement for the providers to do it. You are not required to choose this new form of reimbursement. And it is a new form of reimbursement. This is not a return to alternative services for transportation providers. This is very much providing the services that you are vendored for, however, allowing you to be compensated for what appears to be lack of work that we have to be able to give you. So each provider will utilize a unique monthly reimbursement rate. And so again, this is valid through the calendar year, and it will be utilizing those monthly averages that were calculated for that time period, in essence, prior to COVID-19. Billing unit for the monthly reimbursement is comprised of 19 or more one-way trips for an individual within a month. Providers are encouraged to offer services beyond the normal hours of operation and or their typical destinations, thereby increasing opportunities for individuals to access transportation services. So let me just stay with that sentence there, or those last couple sentences real quickly. So a billing unit for the monthly reimbursement is comprised of 19 or more one-way trips for an individual within a month. And so let's say we've got 23 days of day programming that a client wants to attend in a month. A transportation provider is able to bill for their full monthly alternative services rate and provide 9.5 days of transportation to day programming during that month. That's 19 trips. So it's not 19 days, it's 19 trips. So that's, 9.5 days of day programming. Then there's a prorating that folks can do. There's a prorating where you can have a quarter unit, a half unit, or a 3/4 unit based off of these different amounts. This sentence doesn't seem to go along with the whole rest of the directive. It seems kind of strange, but providers are encouraged to offer services beyond the normal hours of operation and or their typical destinations, thereby increasing opportunities for individuals to access transportation services. So first off, what we're describing is not alternative services. We're not describing dropping off packets at people's homes and things like that. What we're describing is transportation to places where the clients have requested that they go to. Again, I don't know what the correlation is between transportation providers working outside their normal hours of operation or the typical destinations and the creation of a monthly rate like this, but the department put it in there, and so we are going to encourage service providers to do this. I guess I'm not really clear again the correlation there. To use the monthly reimbursement rate, providers must certify agreement and ability to provide in the following conditions. So many of you that were transportation providers previously, just to be clear, you did a certification statement once previously, and it had said that you were going to provide alternative services to people, and you chose which alternative services that you would offer, like as your company and things like that. This is not that. This does not have the same things attached to it. So I want to verify and make sure folks are aware this is a different certification statement that you would be filling out. So services will be responsive to the needs of individuals served, including service volume and schedules. So responsive to the needs of individuals served. We've been saying this in this meeting for quite some time, but when it comes to services, it needs to be from the client's perspective of what their needs are, including service volume, number of days, and schedules when the transportation actually happens. And these are not surprises. Detailed records will be maintained for transportation providers to each individual. Detailed records will be maintained for the vehicle capacity that you ran during those days, keeping track of ambulatory versus non-ambulatory passengers. You have to keep all the other documentation you have that's required here under the California Code of Regulations to verify that you provided the units of service that you're billed for. And DDS will be developing some type of new quarterly report for folks to fill out. So the quarterly reports will be submitted with information related to vehicle capacity. The department will provide instructions for quarterly reporting in the near future. So don't know exactly when the near future is, but there is a quarterly reporting aspect to this. There is also a vehicle gas reimbursement aspect of this as well, because the monthly rates and the gas costs are bifurcated. And so I don't know, and maybe one of you might know the answer. I don't know what the claiming process for gasoline is going to be with this new directive. We know what it was previously for alternative services. I'm just not sure if it's supposed to be the exact same thing. So the enclosed certification form shall be submitted to the regional center prior to submitting claims for reimbursement using the monthly rate. Providers may continue to use traditional reimbursement rates. However, only one reimbursement rate may be used for each individual in a given month. Regional centers shall confirm the the unique monthly reimbursement rate with each provider and work with individuals to update service authorizations if needed. The department encourages transportation providers, regional centers, and stakeholders, that's you guys, to continue to network and evaluate new ways to meet the transportation needs of individuals. Discussion regarding options for service delivery in the future is forthcoming. Okay, and then let me go real quickly to this form, which is the enclosure form. And this is your it's an attestation form like we did previously. Providers shall complete this before they're able to do their first billings. And it's all the things that they just got done saying. Services will be responsive to the needs of individuals served, and then the different record keepings, and that there's going to be quarterly reports that are going to be submitted in accordance with department instructions that I guess that will be forthcoming. Okay, so that was that's a lot of new stuff for us that we had heard, or we were suspecting that there might be some opportunities or changes to transportation rates because there was not a lot of movement to address, honestly, all of the concerns about the rate study and the transportation, and it did not seem like anyone was floating a fix per se that was going to be imminent as it related to transportation. At least I had not heard of one. And so this is the fix that we have for this moment, which is these new monthly reimbursement rates and allowing us to do this. Talking about how we're going to operationalize this, we did send this invitation out to our client services managers because I wanted to give folks a heads up that we're going to be going over this, but we still need to look at how we're going to operationalize this at the regional center. We met about it this morning a little bit. I think we met about it, 2 or 3 times last week as well, trying to kind of nail down what our process is. One of the challenges that we're facing is that we're already there's a ton of transportation requests that we're plowing through right now that still need to be reviewed. And so the good thing is that those transportation requests indicate things like, the number of, days a week an individual wants to be transported, etc. So perhaps it would be easier to figure out what the, rate is going to be, whether it's going to be a full 1 unit, a quarter unit, a half unit, a 3/4 unit. For you transportation providers, you can expect a letter to come out from me. In that letter, it's going to basically be rehashing the transportation memo that was put out by the department for the directive. And then also there will be a link to a Sign Now where you can log in and do an electronic signature for your certification form. So each provider is really going to have, a look and determine whether or not this seems to make financial sense to them or not. Certainly, if your monthly rate was small during alternative services and you've been looking at trying to expand your business now, not doing traditional services, that may not make a lot of sense. So again, the plan is we'll get the letter out to you all. We need to meet with our transportation coordinators and figure out how we're going to look at transitioning the authorizations that we have. And then we'll be giving additional instructions probably next Friday, just on how we've shared it with our service coordinators. So what we've done with a lot of these things that we have put out to, with these crazy changes that are constantly going on, is that, we like to share with you as service providers what the training we've done for our service coordinators is. So as we nail down how we're going to operationalize this internally at the regional center, then we'll come back to you all as service providers and let you know kind of what you can expect as far as possible conversations from service coordinators and things like that. I'll be honest with you, this is not a fantastic time to ask our staff to have to redo a lot of work. We have already been in a process of trying to transition a lot of things from alternative services to traditional services. And so throwing this into the mix, the 19 hours, if anyone, and Eric may be able to illuminate us more, but I will tell you, the 19 hours was, or not 19 hours, excuse me, the 19 trips was something that was definitely a very big part of the conversation yesterday during the chief financial officers meetings with the Department of Developmental Services here at Alta yesterday morning. So I'm going to throw it to Eric because Eric shot me an email before this meeting about a concern about having, in essence, a bus or a van or whatever it is that has ridership that is both traditional and alternative in that same month. And so, well, I shouldn't say alternative. Oh, I got to get away from that. I don't know what we're going to call this new. We'll call it monthly, the new monthly rates, which is, the new monthly rates. So Eric, your thoughts on this? Again, I know you were part of the DDS work group, so maybe can we call you the author of this, or is that too much? Okay, good. Not claiming
that. This is not my or any individual person's recommendation. In fact, I propose a different option besides the monthly unit rate that was deemed a bit too, I think, complicated regulatory for DDS to do. So, so this directive, some of us saw it, we gave some feedback. They didn't take all of our feedback, but some of it made it into the directive. I think that statement that you're like, that seems out of place. I think part of that is the reason, the justification of why transportation might need something like this is that the programs that we're serving are often coming back in very modified ways that don't allow the efficiency for the vehicles. So if the vehicle typically could serve X number of people per service hour, for example, that's not possible. People want to go different places, different times. And so there was, and there has been closure of transportation providers. The rate study in the future doesn't help make people want to hold out. And so they wanted to come up with something, but the idea was, and you did a good point, I just have to say it again, that this is for in-person transportation. So that's the big change. And but we wanted to make sure that there was a rate if you had, say, a per trip rate that no longer works because everybody is doing all different things now. there could be an alternative rate that you could bill for, not alternative, a different billing methodology, monthly, a different option that would allow for maybe decreased vehicle efficiency. Because we basically want to make sure that people were provided enough to have vehicles and drivers running. We don't want to pay for vehicles and drivers not running, or the department doesn't. So, and you're right about the trips. That was the decision of the department. That was a long debate about what volume should you need to get the monthly rate. And the original thought was half, if you get, but the point is you needed something. You needed more than just a trip. You needed to be regularly providing services to people very regularly. So they came up with 50%, which was 19 trips. And then there was the scale down from there. The issue that I raised, and it was not actually, it's two issues I raised that were not ended up in the thing. One is, it's my understanding that this does away with the cap. There's a monthly, under alternative services, there was a cap that you could bill for, and we advocated that cap be removed under this billing methodology. I believe it is, but it's not explicit, because if you're hiring drivers and adding vehicles and you're growing your business beyond what it was before alternative services, you shouldn't be hitting a cap if it's now for in-person transportation. So I believe the cap is gone, but it's not explicit in the directive. We want to verify that. You're right about the fuel billing, because that's part of the enclosures that we used to do. So we'll want to get verification if we're going to verify fuel. And then my second comment was, how in the world would you bill double if you have like a vehicle service hour rate or rate miles rate or some sort of other combo rate where you're billing for multiple people in a vehicle or multiple people on a route? How can you then separate out, if I'm going to bill half of these people, say 5 of these people traditional and 5 using the monthly rate? Do I bill, if it's like vehicle service hour, you'd still bill almost all of your vehicle service hours and then the monthly rate, that would be double billing. So it's not really clear how you would discount your traditional rates if you're blending people. So my suggestion that we're following, at least at our company, I'm just making people think about that. If you want to not move your whole company to one rate or the other, if you think there's a reason why you'd want to split rates, which that directive allows, you really should be proactive about splitting your operations differently. So like this vehicle and these passengers are traditional, and you don't mix those with your monthly billing rate, individuals, because there's just no way. I don't see a way to untangle the billing between those. So I think that's how we're going to have to figure this out, is that you're going to have to designate vehicles so that only the monthly rate folks are served by those vehicles or at any one time if there's more than one person on a vehicle. If you're doing individual vehicles, it doesn't matter. But if you're doing groups, that's where it becomes an issue. So just think about that if you're planning for a transportation company and doing the math to see if it makes sense to do one or the other or both. And yeah.
So obviously, as I've said, we thank you very much for that, and thank you for your participation and your advocacy in trying to promote something that makes sense for folks. It looks like you have one more comment though, real quick.
Sorry, separate from this, the first meeting was all about the rate study, and I gave my recommendations on the rate study, and we had a follow-up group after that, and we agreed that there was strong agreement by the department that rate study needs to be amended. And I think that sentence at the end, there was like, look forward for more conversations for detail. That I believe it wasn't explicit as I wanted it, but I specifically said, put something in there saying we're working on it. So there is a group that met. We paused work because they wanted to do this monthly billing unit. So we wanted to get this out and get started. And the goals for that group to resume. And I did give some of my recommendations, which at least right now, we're basically creating a new rate table for transportation is what we're doing, with alternative either supplemental miles or supplemental time that can get added if your trip is longer and requires more time or miles than what is in the rate study. So the idea that seemed to get some traction, because we realized that with the distances that folks sometimes travel for rural areas or folks that require special needs go well outside of any average, it's not possible to do an average. Stop doing that. So they were very, very favorable of that. I don't want to get too much, because that a lot of times the TDS says, hey, that sounds like a great idea, and it never goes anywhere. So,
Exactly.
So I don't want to promise anything, but there will be a reconvening of that group is what we've been told. And we're going to come back to fixing the rate study or throwing it out and doing a new rate table for that. So that's.
And Eric, when we get to talking to the governor's budget, maybe we can discuss a possible correlation to the line item related to the rate study and federal rates for transportation.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. So I know we have a number of transportation providers that are on here. I want to share, we discussed this during our provider advisory committee meeting yesterday as well. And one thing that was, I think we just all have to understand is that transportation impacts us all. Like transportation is what we spend so much of our funding on as a regional center. And when it is broken down and not happening, it has huge impacts on clients and families. And so with that, and service providers certainly as well. And so with that, one of the things that was proposed was that when we talk with transportation providers, that we have, our other providers available for that as well. I again wonder if maybe a meeting and discussion like this, I did invite the transportation providers today. I know we've got a few on that don't typically participate in this call, but having a large vendor meeting once we get like this nailed down our internal processes is something that we certainly want to look at doing. It may well be in next week's Coffee with Community Services. We're just going to have to see how we get things operationalized. But we know we meet with you all at least once, weekly. And so this might be a good opportunity because, again, it crosses over so many different areas. So as a rehash, we did send out yesterday to transportation providers an email copy of the memo from the department with a directive on it. There will also be a letter coming out from me as soon as I get the sign now link from Iqbal and Locke. I will add it to my letter that's going to go out to everyone. And then you will have a letter transportation providers that lets you indicate if you are interested in doing the certification for transportation services. It'll give you that opportunity. And then I think that'll prompt further discussions, possibly with transportation providers that want to determine whether or not they want to do it or not do it based off of kind of what their current ridership is. So I will open that up to questions or comments from folks. We certainly had a number of comments yesterday that were kind of in line with Eric's as well. There's some frustration, certainly from folks about the choosing of 19 one-way trips to be considered. Certainly the discussion about why the directive didn't do something like incentivize transportation providers by, if you go above what your monthly average was for trips before 2021, then you can be eligible for this additional rate. The issue is that this fix has no money that they need to really tie to it because they already know it's a very fixed number basically for this, I believe. So anyways, any other comments about this? Again, just this was not something that we were aware of in advance. And again, even Eric and the work group, did not know the full details, it sounds like, of what was going to be coming out here. Cindy, yeah, I see your hand up.
Thank you, John. So just a question in regards to the POS for transportation for the SCs. Would there be subcodes for the different units, or do they just need to put in so they would need to select a subcode?
Yeah, so we are in the process of we're going to operationalize what it's going to look like for all of you client services managers that are going to have to give instructions to your service coordinators. But right now we don't have the subcodes. We were told yesterday by DDS that they are going to put the subcodes out. But we meet with accounting every Friday morning before we meet with you all, so we can get like the most updates from accounting and what's going on there for you too. And we met with Robin, and she just said that the subcodes weren't available yet, but we did get confirmation from Jim Knight at DDS yesterday that they are going to do new subcodes for that service. So stay tuned. We'll get it out to everyone. But, again, the way things happen in 2022 and 2023, ever since the pandemic, is, our providers find out about a lot of these things at the exact same time that everyone else does, at the same time we do. And then it's all a rush to try to operationalize some of these things. And so in this case, again, this was not what we were expecting. And we'll do our very best to honestly minimize the impact on our clients if there's any issues, but then also looking at the workloads of our staff and our service providers as well.
Thank you.
New problem. Okay, that was my first agenda item, and it's 11:42. Perfect. We have a few more things that we're going to go over. So we have HCBS. So Alicia, I don't know, you look like you're on a cell phone. You might be.
I am, because my earphones I brought today only plug into my phone.
Oh, perfect. Then in that case, I wonder if I can share my screen. Well, no, I can't, because I don't have my email up. Why don't I have you give us a little update of where we are at with HCBS and give some folks an idea of kind of what we have to come here in the near future?
Okay, well, I have been reviewing documentation that people have sent me. Yesterday, I was able to get 14 more providers compliant and mark 6 more as closed that were incorrectly on the DDS spreadsheet. So that's great. We also have someone helping me now review documents, since we've got about 90 providers who have sent stuff in that I'm working on reviewing everything that they've sent to see if they're compliant. We sent out a letter on Monday of this week to all providers who had not responded to any HCBS requests, who haven't submitted any documentation. And I've heard from about 35 of the 100. So I know that at least 35 of them are thinking about working on it. So we do have stuff coming up. We have workshops. We got one next Thursday, then we've got workshops all through February and March. And then we have 2 vendor forums this month. January 25th, we have one for residential providers, and January 26th for non-residential providers, for anyone who needs help making sure that their documentation is correct. And I am also holding office hours every Monday and Tuesday from 2 to 4 on video, so I can share my screen and help people to get in compliance. So I'm sending out all that information to all the providers as I'm going line by line through the spreadsheet. Oh, and I should say that our heightened scrutiny is down from 4% to 1% now. So that's also great news.
So John, I put, again, the HCBS email in if you guys are interested in participating in the forums or the workshops or the office hours. Alicia's been working hard to get those set up. We see the finish line. We're almost there. Hopefully we can get as many compliant before our deadline in March. Excellent.
Thank you very much. Alicia has really dived into this, and it's a big lift. There's quite a few vendors. I know DDS is really hoping for 100% compliance. What we will say is that the department is also planning on putting out a non-compliance letter of their own with some specific consequences that I'm really hoping none of you follow, that happens with you guys. I will say this, you guys that attend a weekly vendor meeting with us are not the ones that are not doing your HCBS documentation. We are working really closely. Hopefully we're going to be doing some site visits out to some care homes that still have not gotten their documentation in as well. And we've got a contract with Carol Wattillo and her company to assist in some of these activities as well through one of our HCBS grants. So again, lots of activity with this. It's going to keep going on through March, and appreciate all the hard work that Alicia and the rest of the staff are putting into it as well. Even Christy got to have fun doing it for a month or two. So it's good times. All right. I want to jump over to a budget update. I'm not going to be able to go super in depth into what is in there because it's the January budget. So it's not super in depth anyways, but I'm going to share my screen real quickly once again, and I'm going to show you, and hopefully folks, let's see, Dan, are we seeing DDS's website on the shared screen?
Yes, we are, John.
Dan has 14 windows up on his laptop right now. All right, so this is DDS's website. I want to show you a couple different ways. One is when it's budget season, typically the state budget information is right on the front page right here. But additionally, and where the budget page is always located at, is if you go to transparency, and you'll find budget information right after that, after transparency. So you go to this fiscal year, and there's a couple different documents. You can read a more detailed report, or you can look at the governor's budget highlights that are here. So again, you can go to budget information, transparency, budget information, pick this fiscal year, and this is the January budget. So we've still got to go through the May revision, and we're going to end up with a budget in the month of June. what you can do to get a look at some of the policy things. And right now, if you have had an opportunity to participate in any of the briefings that have been done by the Department of Developmental Services, this is in essence the depth of what they're going to go through. So first off, 420,000, almost 421,000 individuals are going to be served by our regional centers this year. That is a huge amount of folks. I feel like we just cracked 10 billion for the budget for the Department of Developmental Services, and we are at a $14.2 billion budget. One thing we know is that we do have we do not have the budget surplus that we had previously. I think it's anywhere like 20 to 22 is the estimate for the budget deficit for the state of California. And with that, that's B with a billion. With that though, and again, I am not the expert in reviewing budgets and the historic look at it, but those that I respect that know these things much better than me have said that they feel like this is a well-funded budget for the Department of Developmental Services in the case of the type of year that we're having financially. So we're finally getting funds here for the reduced caseloads for children ages 0 to 5. I don't think that they had that money allocated like they needed to previously, and so now they're going to. There's money in there for a minimum wage adjustment because of all the minimum wages that are going up here starting January. Star home staffing, apparently they're looking at updating some of the star homes, and they're going to convert a couple of them from from adult residential facilities to intermediate care facilities. And there's staffing reasons and a number of different reasons, especially having to do some psychotropic medication, I think, for folks. And so they are looking at changing the state operated facilities, the few that are left. There's money in there for the UFIS modernization. That's our fiscal system. More money. Apparently we're still doing warm shutdowns of the developmental centers. And so Fairview's got $11.3 million. It's extremely expensive to run these institutions, even when they're empty, because they're just huge pieces of property that require a lot of resources. Complex needs residential program, increase of startup resources to develop 3 5-person residential homes for individuals with highly complex needs. I believe those are going to be state operated facilities as well, if I remember correctly. Rate model assumptions. This is what I was kind of talking about earlier, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know the exact details about this. I've heard some things, but I don't know all the details. So rate model assumptions, 10.1 million total funding and 6 million out of the general fund. Increase of ongoing funding to adjust service provider rates for mileage based on updates to the federal Internal Revenue Service mileage rate. 10.1 million is a lot, but when you think about it, I don't know, we spend so much just at I think it's 50 million on transportation just at our regional center in a year. So Eric, have you heard anything about this one at all, or anyone else specifics?
No, that was a surprise to me as well. The typical there are transportation rates that are funded at the IRS rate, and the IRS rate has increased. They set that out like December 30th or something, very late this year. So, typically when I see that, it's a very small adjustment for that. So, but the rest of that, it didn't make sense to me how that's connected direct. Part of the rate models for the rate study includes the transportation rate model is very complicated. There's no IRS rate in there, but there are a couple Burns and Associates specials, which are just these factors, multiplication factors that are applied to mileage. And it's possible that that's tied into that, but really there's a full rate study review. So this is sort of a mystery, unless for some of us, we do have rates where we just get the IRS reimbursement. So that's obvious. But in terms of the provider rate for transportation, that's sort of a mystery.
All right. Well, hey, if we get more detail about what that specifically is, and again, at 10.1 million, it's not going to make a huge impact statewide. So we'll have to take a look at that and get more information about it. Extension of 10 beds at Porterville Developmental Center, increase of one-time resources. As our system keeps growing and growing and growing, the reality is there still needs to be a place where people can get secure treatment and get competency treatment and not be in our local jails. So a little bit of an expansion of the secure treatment there at Porterville. Disparities within the developmental disability services, 2.7 million, increase of 3 permanent positions and additional support to address requirements of Chapter 314 statutes of 2022. I think that is related to the fair hearing process. Maybe I need to verify that a little bit further with folks, but that's one of the other things. Let's see. Protective proceedings, increase of 6 permanent positions to comply with the requirements of Chapter 894 regarding protective proceedings. Let's see, trauma-informed services for foster youth. Autism Services Branch, DDS is going to be developing their own clinical department. I think 6 people over there at DDS for that. And then some money for early start. Let's see, decrease in fiscal year reflecting the delayed implementation of the preschool grant. I know Lori talked about that a little bit during the Provider Advisory Committee meeting, and I know Nancy Vargman shared a little bit about it, but I think it's just pushing out something that had been previously promised in prior budgets. So again, this is the first budget that comes out. This is the first, week or whatever. As more discussions happen, there will be hearings that will be held. And one thing I will just say at this time, it's nice to have people attend the Provider Advisory Committee meetings because you get a lot more detailed information about it from the legislative point of view. There's, a number of different groups that report out in that meeting. During the with the newsletter last that came out for January that we went over during our last Coffee with Community Services, there's a little plug in there for joining the Provider Advisory Committee. And again, we hit 100 in this meeting today, but we usually have less than 30 at our Provider Advisory Committee meetings. And so it is nice to get providers in there, especially I will say we lost our primary transportation provider that was part of our Provider Advisory Committee. Other than you, Eric, sorry. You do a lot of other things other than transportation, but we don't have a pure just transportation provider that's part of the Provider Advisory Committee. And so again, having people's voices be represented, EI services, we haven't had a speech therapist in a while that's been part of. So I think it's good to have that representation across different types of service codes, serving different areas also geographically. And Michelle Ramirez put in the chat there, yes, please come. It's the second Thursdays at 9:30 a.m. We had quite a lively discussion. I thought it was amazing yesterday getting our Provider Advisory Committee back in person, the vast majority of them for the first time in 3 years. And so during the time, just real rich discussions and certainly folks being able to kind of vent to each other some of the frustrations that people are feeling right now as well, running their businesses. Eric, hand up. Yeah.
I believe I'm still the chair of the outreach committee. So there is the newsletter blurb, but we want anybody to come, even if we're well represented. You can always come as a guest. Please come. But there's targeted areas where we feel like we could do with increased representation, because we want that Provider Advisory to include, but not just county representation, but service type representation. So that everybody's well represented. So there are a couple of areas that are low. I would say transportation is low. I'm going off my memory. Transportation. We talked about residential for a long time. We felt like we could use more residential providers. A lot of the early start and the kiddos. There's respite. There's a few different respite providers, but there's also the other services that are primarily for children and specialized services. If you do specialized services, whether it's speech or OT or, repairs, there's all sorts of vehicle modifications, that kind of stuff. So those are some areas that are off the top of my head that we really wanted to make sure that we're putting the invitation out. If you provide those services, or if you just provide day programs, well, we'd still love to have you at the PAC, but we're specifically recruiting in a couple areas.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And it looks like there was a challenge yesterday for CBIM to get into the PAC meeting via Zoom. So, Michelle, you're just going to have to come over and join us. I think we're looking at opening it up to non-members in person here in the near future. We're just going to get the the state of emergency, I think, done at the end of February, and then look at opening up our doors more for the in-person meetings. But for right now, our members are there. And again, it was a fantastic meeting yesterday, getting to see everyone in person and just hear all the discussions with folks. So thank you guys very much. I want to touch on a couple more things before we finish here. First, I got, and just a reminder, and I know we've got some residential folks on here. Sorry, let me touch on state of emergency. There's a question that's come up related to the isolation rate for state of emergencies for people that are isolating in supported living with folks that are positive for COVID. And so the assumption that we made is that when the state of emergency ends related to COVID is that would be a time when that would end as well. And so I'm going to look into that a little bit more. And Michelle McDonald and I can kind of verify. We'll go through the directive again to see if we missed anything related to that. But I would say it's a safe bet that the isolation rates for COVID on the SLS side would end when we have the state of emergency ending as well. All right.
Hey, John.
And sorry, I know that was Carol's question, and then it also came up from Step as well. They reached out, I think, to me too, for that one. So yeah, just want to make sure that we're responsive. Yeah, Eric, go ahead, please.
Sorry, there was some comments on the chat about joining the Zoom. The pack used to be on your WebEx, and then we moved to Zoom. And I believe there's now links on the website. There some folks had said that there was some challenge in finding it. So I think there was some waiting room, I think, issues. I couldn't attend the pack yesterday, but I understand there was some issues joining it. But just for those that are, there's another way to now find the information for the pack on the pack website. I believe there's a link there for you to join.
And a couple last things here. Again, I will say, I would just introduce you to Danny, who is our new community services specialist. And Helen, what is Danny going to be working on? You got to unmute yourself, though.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, John. Danny is going to be working on transportation services, durable medical equipment, environmental accessibility. Those are kind of like the big items that Danny and his partner is going to be working on at. And Danny's here, actually, John.
Yeah. So
Actually.
you want to say hi to folks, Danny?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm happy and excited to get started. It's been quite a couple of weeks, and I've already had a lot of information, a lot of things I need to figure out how to do. But I've got great mentors. Helen has been an absolute joy to work with so far. So yeah, excited to see what the future holds and be part of this team.
Awesome. I keep telling these folks, yeah, Helen was one of the people that trained me when I started in community services. And so I know you guys are in excellent hands. Just a couple more things. We did send out a residential vendor survey regarding the 1 to 3 rates, because we're also looking at ending the 1 to 3 COVID rates. We've received like 90 responses back from our care homes with which clients they feel are going to continue to need a 1 to 3 supplemental staffing rate. And so we're going to be sending that over to case management so that we can start having those facility liaisons contacting the service providers, because the COVID 1 to 3 staffing that we did for residential providers, while people were doing alternative services, that's going to end. But we recognize that because there's these remote services that are available now, it still may be needed. And so we will give opportunities to rewrite those purchases and update them. So I see Phil right there, and all the residential managers are going to be doing a bunch of these, I'm sure, switching over, because there's still a lot of residential providers that feel like they need that supplemental staffing right now. And that is about it. Again, just a little plug. There's a lot of issues that have been addressed related to the ILS rates. And so, again, our PAC is interested in getting ILS providers together for ongoing discussions about that as well. So if you're an ILS provider and you have specific, concerns about your rate, recommend that you reach out to them. I think 56% of our providers did get a rate increase for ILS, but that is still, assumptions that are based off of wages that are not appropriate right now, because the wages are not going to allow people to be able to hire staff. And that's our big issue. So Dan's working on some stuff like that, hopefully with DDS here, and trying to resolve some of our ILS challenges that we have. Again, I will say this though, for our transportation providers, only 4% of them got a rate increase. So to give you an idea for the rate, that is our lowest category amongst our service providers, and Iqbal did the math about all of this. The only 4% of our transportation providers got a rate increase in the rate study. So that does not work if we want to be sustainable. All right. Thank you folks very much. It's 12:03. Look at that, 3 minutes over. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. We'll look forward to talking to folks next week. Many folks have a 3-day weekend unless you are some type of residential provider, and then you never get weekends off. So hope you have a great rest of your day, your weekend. Take care, folks.
Bye. Thank you all.
Bye.